Okay, that is me doing a call to order. Let's do roll call starting down here.
Trista Carlson.
Frank Wagner.
Margaret Beck.
Andrew Lewis.
Deanna Thoman.
Nicole Villanueva.
Kevin Burford.
Awesome. Do we have any public discussion of anything not on the agenda? Okie doke. Moving on to the National Register nomination for the Iowa City Municipal Airport Terminal.
And is it? Yeah. Okay, a National Register nomination for the Iowa City Municipal Airport Terminal has been submitted to the State Historic Preservation Office. Here's just an image of it to remind you. The nomination will be reviewed by the State Nomination Review Committee on June 12th, 2026, followed by review at the National Park Service. Because of the fact that we are a certified local government and it is within our jurisdiction, we are required to review and comment on the nomination. Just go like that. We have a public meeting. If the public wanted to speak, they could. You would then also discuss the nomination. And the point of your discussion is to answer the following question. Does the nominated property meet the National Register of Historic Places criteria for significance and integrity? In order to evaluate that, we look at this National Register Bulletin 15, which is how to apply the criteria. I'm just going to kind of go through and gloss over it for you. I put that in the memo in case anyone wanted to study ahead and review that. You certainly could. At the end, you'll make a motion, whether or not it should be made in the affirmative no matter what, and then you'll vote on it. We have a form that we brought with us, and if you have any comments about the nomination, we can also put that on there, and then we'll have Andy sign it. And then we also have the mayor sign it, and then I sign it, and it goes back to the review committee. They will review the minutes from the meeting, they will review any comments you have, and take that all under consideration when they review the nomination. So the airport, as you know, is located on the south side of Iowa City. As you can see, the runways here form this little triangle, and it's at this portion of the star. Here is a blow-up Google map of it, and you can see that there's those runways forming that triangle. This is most of the airport facility, and the terminal is located right in this location. This is a rotated 90 degrees because north is here, diagram that's from the airport's webpage, and it shows where some of the buildings are, some of the hangars. The terminal is located here. And in the nomination, she talks just briefly about a viewing area that's over here. I'm not really going to go into that at all. Oops. Yeah. Okay, so some of this I'll read and some of it we'll just discuss, but as described in the we'll go through that. As described in the opening summary paragraph of the nomination, the terminal is located on the south side of Iowa City. It was constructed in 1953 and designed by local architect Henry Fisk. The building consists of that two-story central section with a one-story wing on each side. It's clad in both tan brick and limestone in that inset section. The front wall is inset and features a tall vertical glass block window. A metal canopy on paired metal posts indicates the entry. The wing to the north on this side has multiple rectangular punched openings. The wing on the south, as you can see on the other end, only has one horizontal punched ribbon window. On the rear of the building, towards the runways, the building has a two-story angled bump out with large expanses of vertical glass at each level. The wings also have larger windows in this direction. As you can see, this is the other side of the south wing, and then this is the other side of the north wing. On the interior, the trim and partitions are constructed of birch and glass. Here you have probably one of the ticketing counters. I didn't go through and mark what all of these parts are, but here's another one. This is the look from that main waiting area out onto the tarmac. Here is a historic phone booth that's still there with its sign. The building also has its main staircase with its historic aluminum railing. Here is the stair tower, basically, with glass on both sides, letting light into the upper waiting room. And here you see that from the inside. And this is that second floor looking out. Okay. The building exhibits hallmarks of the international style, including an asymmetrical composition of rectilinear geometric forms. One side is longer than the other, basically. A flat roof without coping or a cap, horizontal bands of windows, and flat wall surfaces without decoration. There have been several changes, including this egress door in that second floor waiting room. And that led to a walkway along that south wing with a metal egress stairs. So when we're reviewing a building, we look at two things. We look at its significance and its integrity. And in order to talk about significance, there are specific criteria that the National Park Service has. And the criteria under which this property is nominated is architecture, which is a property that embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or that represents the work of a master, or that possesses a high artistic value, or that represents a significant and distinguishable entity whose components lack individual distinction. In order to discuss its significance, the property is talked about in the nomination in all of its historic contexts. So we'll kind of look through that. First, the nomination talks about the airport history. For instance, in 1910, there were some early exhibition flights that were intended to stimulate the public's interest in aviation. Post-World War I, there were more trained pilots, obviously, and there started to be local, in Iowa City even, sponsorship of flying events. In 1921, the airport became a nighttime stop on transcontinental airmail flights, which actually led to a lot of interest in the local airport and support. In 1922, Mayor Emma Harvett signed the first lease for the airfield, and the very first building was constructed on the airfield. In 1926, Boeing Air Transport was awarded the air route from Chicago to San Francisco by the U.S. Postmaster. And because they stopped here, there was a lot of pressure to improve the airfields. And so the city and the communities really started working towards improving the airfield. And so in 1929, the airport expanded. This photo just shows the Boeing hangar that no longer exists from the 1930s, the hangar, and there's a ticketing office over here. By 1930, the city limits were expanded to include the airport. And then between 1942 and 1945, the university started offering training and was one of 5 pre-flight schools that existed. Then the nomination goes into the construction, the history of the construction of the terminal itself. And a lot of that has to do with the funding for it. And so they talk about how in post-World War II, there was a federal investment in small community aviation. It's because we started having a lot more passenger flights. There was a lot more shipping of materials and goods as well. And of course, a lot more pilots again because of the war. So locally, in 1946, we put in some new concrete runways. And then in 1948, we built a new building for mechanics that had a waiting room and restrooms as well. Also in 1948, the Civil Aeronautics Administration, they started publishing recommendations about administration buildings, what they would need, how to build them, some talk about funding as well. And the city had kind of anticipated this interest, and so they had been pushing internally for coming up with funding for a terminal building anyway. And so after the war, they sought funding. And I don't know that she went into the call for architects or how that all started, but in 1950, Henry Fisk submitted preliminary plans and a contract was approved. So through some airport bonds that were, I can't remember who purchased them, but it was like a large company or something purchased them, and a grant from the CAA, the terminal was funded. Then they started having a lot of delays. If you can imagine, after World War II, there were some restrictions on materials. You couldn't necessarily use all the steel you might want to use, partly because of shortages, and also because there had been shortages. They were starting to stockpile and restrict uses of materials. And so there were some delays, specifically because of the use of metals. Fisk had actually somewhat anticipated this and had designed the building to use a minimal amount of steel, which was good because that helped make it so that it could be approved because it had a lower use of steel than other buildings of that size. Some of the shortages continued along with weather delays in the 52, and finally the building was completed in 1953. Some key aspects of the terminal design were that they had that entry canopy for loading and unloading vehicles. The west windows over the airfield was tinted to kind of limit the glare of the sun. The floor was radiant heated concrete, originally at least. They had air conditioning. They had a modern asphalt tile flooring. And they had some what are called modernistic light fixtures. That north wall of the longer wing was also not clad in brick and built like a masonry construction. It was built with wood, and it was clad with kind of like a lap siding or a wood siding in order to be able to expand in the future. It also had a restaurant that opened in 1954 and eventually by 1955 expanded to include the upstairs middle area. Passenger air service was provided through United Airlines from 1935 until 1959, and then Ozark Airlines from 59 to 72. And then after that, it became mostly for, shipping things in and stuff instead of passengers. That's just a shot of some passengers in that first floor waiting area looking out at the planes. Mm-hmm. And then the National Register nomination talks about Fisk himself. He was born in 1901 in New York. The family moved in 1910 to Iowa City because his father worked at the university as a superintendent of buildings and grounds. He went to the university here, but then at least another university, and finally got his architecture degree at the University of Pennsylvania. He worked at Proudfoot, Bird & Rawson in Des Moines, which was a preeminent architecture firm at the time, but he also worked at several other firms across the country, mostly in the Midwest and the East. But by 1933, he returned to Iowa City and opened his own firm. He focused then on public, residential, educational, and industrial buildings, as it talks about in the nomination. In 1942, though, he closed up his firm and joined the Navy as a lieutenant and went off to war. I don't think the nomination talked about that a whole lot, but then after the war, he came back and he worked in architecture again and did a variety of buildings. And then most notably, we've talked in the past a little bit with other buildings. Between 1959 and 1962, he was partnered with Roland Wayner in the Fisk and Wayner architecture firm. And then he died suddenly of a heart attack. He was driving and ran his car into a pole, having his heart attack in 1962. This is just a newspaper ad of the White Cloud Room, the upper floor of the restaurant there, looking out over the plains, which I think is kind of funny. Then the nomination talks about modernism itself. And you have to understand that modernism was a reaction against basically all of the historic past, but then it was also an attempt to come up with solutions for the lack of materials that we used to use, for how we were looking at new materials and creating new materials, and then basically how the history of art and architecture changed at that moment. And so there is kind of an emphasis, instead of making architecture that's like a decorated box, into something that is about function and how the space functions and how you move from one space to another, and getting rid of ornament completely. Modernism is an umbrella term, and there are many styles underneath it. And the one we talk about in relationship to this building is the International style. It was started basically through a 1932 exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art. Henry Russell Hitchcock and Philip Johnson were the curators of this exhibit, and they published a book where they really talked about the International style. And it was about a return to, or a progression towards machines and machine age culture, and having a building work like a machine. And there was a lot of connections with architecture and machines at that time. The characteristics were that emphasis on functionality, the use of simple rectilinear geometric forms, asymmetry, horizontality, smooth wall surfaces, flat roofs, floor-to-ceiling windows, and an avoidance of applied decoration. And so I'll just read basically the paragraph on significance that is included in the nomination. So the airport terminal in Iowa City is significant under Criterion C as an excellent and well-preserved example of a modern movement airport terminal influenced by the International style, an architectural expression especially associated with the post-World War II era. Designed by Iowa City architect Henry Fisk, the building's construction was funded by airport bonds and a grant from the Federal Civil Aeronautics Administration. Essentially unaltered, the airport terminal embodies the distinctive characteristics of the International style, including an asymmetrical composition of rectilinear geometric forms, a flat roof without coping, horizontal bands of windows, flat wall surfaces without decoration. Many of the windows are arranged in a linear fashion. Large windows on the taxiway runway elevation allowed optimal viewing of the planes from both the first and second floors. Original signage on the east and west elevation also survives. Additionally, the interior plan remains intact, as does the staircase with its aluminum and glass railing to the second floor, light fixtures, and an original phone booth. The period of significance for the building is 1953, the year the terminal was placed in service. So that talks about the significance, and her narrative goes through and supports all of the different points that she makes there. And then the next thing that we discuss is the integrity of the building. The building must have sufficient integrity to convey that significance. And the National Register has basically assigned 7 different areas that you evaluate integrity, and they are listed here. I've underlined the ones where I felt personally that it expressed it the most. I don't have a slide about this, but I have another paragraph to read. Okay, so and they're not in the same order, I'm sorry. She wrote them in a way in order to emphasize things, and this is their typical order. So for the setting for the airport terminal remains as an active airport with taxiways and runways immediately to the west of the building. Vehicular parking remains on the east side of the building, and the airport property includes airplane maintenance building and hangars. The materials. The building retains its tan brick exterior, glass block, metal letters on 2 elevations spelling the name and location of the building, steel lintels, and limestone sills on the windows. On the interior, the building retains its original stone masonry in the vestibule, birch trim, doors and partitions, the phone booth, the counter and pass-through opening, concrete and aluminum and glass staircase, and glass and aluminum light fixtures. The workmanship. The historic workmanship is present in the exterior masonry and the installation of the glass block on the large east window. On the interior, the workmanship of the stonework in the vestibule, wood trim doors, and partitions is evident. And so then the last 3, I think, really speak to why it's nominated, and that's design. The terminal's design, including its fenestration, plan, and international style form and details, remains virtually unchanged. Window and door replacements are sympathetic to the historic design. The interior staircase, wood trim and doors, and the light fixtures on the exterior and interior contribute to the 1950s aesthetic. Feeling. This is a hard one to really grasp what it means. And she has said it in just one sentence. So, feeling. The Iowa City Municipal Airport Terminal evokes the architectural expression of the post-World War II period and expresses the nation's renewed interest in civil aviation in the 1950s through its design, the fact it was constructed, and then association. The airport terminal conveys an association with post-World War II civil aviation. And so we can look at any of the other slides. Otherwise, I have put up a proposed recommended motion that basically lists the building, its address, the fact that it's eligible, has sufficient integrity, and its criterion C, and then why. And so that's all I have. If you have any questions, want to see any of the other images, we can go through it.
So, commission discussion, or not even that? Ask questions for anybody? Okay, and then do we have a movement? That's not what I want, but.
Beck moves to recommend that the Iowa City Municipal Airport Terminal at 1801 South Riverside Drive is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places with sufficient integrity to convey its significance in criterion C as an example of a modern movement airport terminal influenced by the international style in the post-World War II era.
Wagner seconds.
Cool. Commission discussion.
I would like to add one thing. The form, and I'll pass it down, does definitely include a place if you have comments. So we can, and then we can add some to the back or something like that. So if you do have comments that you want to include on the form, you should come up with what that is.
Yeah, Louis speaking. I don't know that I have anything additional to say to what was just told here, but it seems like a good idea. It seems cool. I'm in.
I agree. Last summer, I went into that building for the very first time, and it's a really interesting space for all the details that were mentioned in the application, but it has a way of feeling very grand and big, but it is a very small building. There's something about the scale of the windows and the staircase and being able to look out. I think it's a great building, so I'm excited about this.
Excuse me, are all the questions allowed?
Yeah, you can definitely, you have to sign in just like any time, but you can come up and speak. They would need, I mean, if you want to invite them.
Sure.
I guess sign here?
Yep.
The building is only like 2,000 square feet.
Yeah. Yeah. Cousin's house.
And to think they had a restaurant.
I know.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm an architect. I work in Iowa City. I have been living originally from Mexico, but living in Iowa City for probably about 23 years. And the first time like that, since I came to Iowa City, is like as an architect, just trying to realize, okay, what is out there? Mr. Fisk is like probably is like one of the first architects that I learned about. Like I just looking like the books and things, and something was very interesting to me. By coincidence, like a few years back, probably 2-3 years back, I had the opportunity. A client reached out to me, and it happens. It was a Henry Fix house, and the ironic thing is like that when I was in, I was just seeing like the many qualities of the architecture. That for example, like the open views, like the lights in the coves that you see like just a ceiling, but then suddenly you see like a cove that is almost not there, but is there. Like that is like it's just many things that just make the space like that very special. Then also coincidentally, when I came to the U.S., I used to work right across from this building, like this very building we're talking about. And to me, it always felt like a chain link fence building. And I was just sad about it like that, because that is like that. When I learned like there was the architect, I was thinking like, oh, there must be something else that we could do about that building to appreciate its characteristics. There is I don't know if it still are, but I remember there like the military trucks. I think it was like a National Guard or something like that. So my point is like and I don't know if this is the space for this group here today to discuss, but I just felt like that there is a lot more to appreciate, more than chain link fence for this architecture. However, I do appreciate the efforts of all of you here for the recognition of this building. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that.
Burford, I have fond memories of eating at the restaurant there when I was a kid.
Sweet.
And watching, and I recall when United and Ozark, I've used that as an actual airport. But it's remarkable that it's so unchanged after all that time, and that it still exists. It's just amazing.
It's a place of learning now, too. I take continuing eds in that space, and I love it because it's so bright, and you can see planes rolling in.
Cool.
Nice place for learning.
Was the food any good?
Yeah, and they had a jukebox as well, which I enjoyed playing.
There again, I'm surprised they fit a restaurant in there. But yet the ad, and I'm kind of transporting myself back into that space, it does feel very expansive. But yeah, interesting.
Okie doke. Any other comments? Okay. Do we want to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okie doke. Moving on to certificates of appropriateness, starting with 25 North Van Buren Street.
Okay, thank you. Ann Russett with Neighborhood and Development Services. Okay, so this is for 25 North Van Buren Street, which is shown here on the map with the star. It is a contributing property in the Jefferson Street Historic District. Here is a photograph of the front facade. This home was built around 1877. It's a two-story front gable Victorian cottage. You can see on this photo here, this is the historic door, which still remains, and this was a door that was later added. The home is covered in metal siding, and this property has succumbed to a significant amount of deferred maintenance over the years. However, it was recently sold, and the new owner is looking to make some substantial improvements to the property. Recently, the staff and chair approved a repair of the northern foundation wall, which was caving in. And today, the request before you is to replace the metal roof with architectural asphalt shingles. The lower sloped roofs will be replaced with membrane roofing. There are internal gutters that will also need to be removed due to deterioration. However, the internal gutters on the front porch will be repaired. And the project also includes replacement and repair of trim and trim details due to deterioration. So here are a few more photographs. This is the western facade in the rear. This is the northern facade on the side of the house. And this is the alley side, the southern facade. And this is one of the bump ups that would be a membrane roofing here. You can also see the trim that's deteriorated and the brackets that are gone. All of that would be replaced to match the existing. This is an internal gutter that would be removed as part of the project, as part of the re-roofing project. And here's another photo of that kind of metal roof on the rear addition. And this is the front porch. Again, the front porch internal gutters would remain. Okay, so the guidelines, in terms of the guidelines, our guidelines recommend repairing original built-in gutters, covering original built-in gutters, and applying exterior gutters. Only if the roof slope is not altered is recommended. Also, original built-in gutters can be removed if they are unable to be repaired, and this can be approved by the commission on a case-by-case basis. In terms of mass and roof lines, historic trim should be preserved whenever possible. In this case, a lot of it is gone or significantly deteriorated, so it would need to be replaced. The guidelines also recommend maintaining metal roofs where possible. And again, with this home, it's just too deteriorated to repair, so the recommendation is to replace. And again, that can be done by the commission on a case-by-case basis. So staff finds that the metal roof is significantly deteriorated and supports the replacement of the roof with architectural asphalt shingles and the replacement of internal gutters. The replacement of the membrane roofing on those low-sloped areas is appropriate, and that all the trim would be repaired, replaced, or remain as needed, matching what was there originally. So staff recommends approval of certificate of appropriateness for the project at 25 North Van Buren Street, allowing replacement of the deteriorated metal roof, including the internal gutters, with architectural asphalt shingles, and the replacement of the metal roof on the front porch and southern bump out with membrane roofing. Again, the internal gutters on the roof on the front porch would be repaired, and all trim would either be repaired or replaced as needed with wood to match the existing. That's all I have. Thank you.
Sounds good. Are there any questions for staff?
Did we have somebody go out and look at the metal roofs then?
Yeah.
Okay,
Jessica and I both did.
okay.
And the architect is here as well.
Right.
Do we have commentary from the owner? That's the next step, I think, right? Yeah.
Or the,
Or architect or anybody,
yeah.
if you want to comment or if we have questions for you, but you don't have to if you don't want to.
You just have to come up and sign it.
Yeah.
I am Justin Straight. I'm the general contractor and project manager. And the one note to what you said, the South Bay window, the internal gutters on that will also be able to be salvaged. The curb gutter, the Yankee style, however, is best referred to on the south face, is in seriously bad shape, and it's such that the way that it's built and formed, it would require a crazy amount of work. And then the way that the gutter actually discharges, it goes out the eave of the backside of the house, so it'd be on the west side. And so it actually goes, it's right above the exterior wall. Where it's placed and the location in conjunction with the state of it currently is one of the reasons that we wanted to just go ahead and get rid of it. And also due to the extensive amount of other work that's going to be done.
Thank you.
I had just one question on the, it says you're going to replace all the trim, replace it. Is the metal siding coming off? Because you're kind of replacing wood trim, but you got metal siding.
the metal siding is staying.
No.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Thoman moves to approve a certificate of appropriateness for the project at 25 North Van Buren Street, allowing replacement of the deteriorated metal roof, including the internal gutters with architectural asphalt shingles and the replacement of the metal roof on the front porch and southern bump out with membrane roofing materials. All trim will be either repaired or replaced as needed with wood and match the existing profiles.
Burford seconds.
Okay. Commission discussion? It seems like we're coming up with Yankee gutters or whatever all the time, and I think we've approved replacing them before. If anything, just because they're so hard to replace anyway. Like, we don't have anybody who can.
They don't work well either.
Right.
And I think this house is lucky to have found somebody to take on all the work. So I'm glad for that.
Exactly.
Anything else? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
All opposed? Good. Thank you so much. Moving on to 404 Brown Street.
Thank you. Just to add to Deanna's comment, Jessica and I took several phone calls when this property was for sale, asking about demolition.
I
So,
wondered.
Over and over and over and over again.
so yes, it's good to feel lucky. I think that's a good comment.
Well, the other thing I thought, you can tell by the front doors, and I've seen it, I went by one time when it was opened. It's an old house, and the staircase in front is 1870s, and it's a neat building.
Yeah, it might be an Italianate house under that.
That's why I was wondering if we get to see that, but got to leave the clothes on, I guess.
Yeah. Baby steps
Yeah.
that are actually really big steps.
Toddler.
Okay, 404 Brown Street. This next project is for the property at 404 Brown, which is a contributing property in the Brown Street Historic District. It's shown here with the star on the map. This home was built in 1916. It's an American four-square. And in terms of background, in 2018, the commission approved an attached garage for this property. However, that project never moved forward. The previous owner never ended up constructing it. And today there are new owners who would also like to have a garage and have proposed something slightly different than what the commission approved in 2018, so it's coming back for your review. Here's an aerial view of the property. You can see that the home is set back. It's a substantial front setback from Brown Street, leaving very little room in the rear yard for a garage. So that's why a detached garage for this property is very difficult. The project that was originally approved was a little unusual in that the access to the garage was through the neighbor's property at 414. That easement hadn't been secured at the time, but the idea was they would eventually get an access easement from the neighbor and they'd enter into the garage from the east side. The proposal now is to have kind of more of an easier entrance off of North Gilbert Street. And here are the plans for the garage. The garage has a flat roof with a simple balustrade, and it will have wood lap siding that would match the profile of the home. The trim will be smooth LP Smart Side. All windows on the garage will be metal clad wood and double hung. So this is the north elevation here. The east elevation over here, and then the west is where the entrance will be, so you can see the single stall garage door here. This will be a steel door with composite overlay. Here is a kind of a plan view of the addition. They are going to maintain the original corner of the house, which is located here. They're going to set the addition in from that original corner and then project it back out to give them more space for vehicular parking inside, since it really wasn't feasible to do a 2-stall garage with the amount of space that they had. This photograph shows the rear of the home and where the addition would be. So this is the original corner of the house that will be maintained, and the addition would be in this location here. The guidelines for new outbuildings recommend placing new outbuildings at the rear, constructing garages that are subordinate to the primary structure, installing garage doors that are simple in design, but carriage-style doors are also allowed and may be appropriate. Adding trim around the garage door openings that match the trim and other doors and windows of the building, incorporating windows into the design that are relatively small and rectangular. The guidelines do not recommend constructing garages that are attached to primary buildings. So in our analysis, staff finds that the majority of these guidelines are met. However, the proposal is to have an attached garage, which is not recommended by the guidelines. The commission has the ability to consider an exception to the guidelines due to uncommon situations. The intent in considering alternative designs is to allow architectural flexibility in exceptional circumstances, such as non-compliant structures, irregular lots, and projects which satisfy the intent of the guidelines as interpreted by the commission. So staff finds that the property presents a unique condition that justifies an exception to the guidelines to allow an attached garage, mainly due to that very large front setback and not having any room in the rear to build a detached garage. So staff finds the exception is warranted for this project due to the unique configuration of the home on the lot. And furthermore, the proposed addition does not significantly affect the architectural character of the historic home. Staff recommends approval of the certificate of appropriateness for the project at 404 Brown Street as presented in the staff report through an exception to the guidelines allowing an attached garage due to the placement of the home on the lot.
Okey-doke. Are there any questions for staff?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Can you go back to, I think it was like not the drawing of the garage, but when you were kind of showing, sorry, go back, I think one more. Yes, this one. So I guess I'm curious because like my understanding is with additions, we set them in so you can't see them. But this one then does clearly bump out. I guess what's the reason? Is it just because it's a garage and you can't see it at all from like the front because it's such a huge setback? Like why an exception for this?
Yeah, they are maintaining that original corner, which we worked with them on. Bringing it completely in makes the garage almost non-functional.
Yeah.
And because of the distance from Brown as well.
All right, just curious. I think this is a great idea. Not questioning it, just really curious.
Yeah, I have a question as well. This is Lewis speaking. If you go back a couple more, I don't know which one it is. This one, nope, keep going. This one. A lot of times we're worried about like lines of like where windows are and where foundation is, and these don't seem to match. I don't know if this is just the drawing or if this is a plan or if that's something that we don't care about right now or do, or I don't really.
Are you talking about this area here not matching here? Yeah. I think it's the topography of this site is really challenging.
Sure.
And I think that's part of the reason that you see that difference, but it is a difference.
It will be different.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Thoman. I'm trying to get myself oriented here. The picture with the two red arrows of the corner of the house itself.
Yeah, is right here, back in here. Maybe that's not the best.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just.
So
The house does have a big addition on the back. And so they're basically setting in from just the historic house and then wrapping around the addition that was put on by the previous owner.
And this is a garage, not an ADU.
It's just a garage.
It's just a garage.
is it 2 cars?
You know, it has that one stall opening. I'm not sure how they're going to configure maybe tandem parking is possible. Maybe the applicants can speak to that.
And just for general background information, I know this house, it's beautiful. It does have that huge front yard. We would never consider putting something out in front of the house because that would then take away from the dominance of the house. Is that correct?
Yes.
How I understand it? Okay.
It's Wagner speaking. And I think really if you, with this picture, that's Gilbert Street on the right and Brown Street's in front. I don't even know if you'd be able to see that that garage from either vantage point, because Gilbert Street, you're looking up this way, and Brown Street, you're looking up that way. It's nestled back in there.
Cool. Any other questions for staff? Okay. If the owners would like to speak, you don't have to, but if you'd like to, you can, yeah.
Usage or how we're going to get a second car.
Parking.
We're not sure.
You need to sign in.
Yeah.
I'm Ned Austin. People call me Buck, and my wife Morgan and I own the house. We hope to be able to get a second car in there. We were through several different iterations of this design,
I'd imagine.
and there was just not a way to get a conventional two-car. This is probably the closest that we can come to. We might be able to get a second car on, you know what skates are? Like you can put a car on these dollies and then put it back there for like winter storage.
Sure.
Otherwise, maybe space for a workshop or storage or something like that.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Do we have a motion?
Wagner moves to approve a certificate of appropriateness for the project at 404 Brown Street as presented in the staff report through an exception to the guidelines allowing an attached garage due to the placement of the home on the lot.
Villanueva seconds.
Do we have any commission discussion?
I will just say in general, I don't like attached garages on old homes, but this really is an exception. I can see it.
Good solution.
Okey doke. All in favor?
Enjoy your cute garage.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okey doke. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to reports on certificates issued by chair and staff, starting with no material effect and 324 North Lucas Street.
Okay. Yes, 324 North Lucas, this is a contributing property in the Goosetown Horace Mann Conservation District, and this was issued for the repair and replacement of deteriorated trim. 25 North Van Buren, which we discussed earlier today. This is the approval for the repair and reconstruction of that failing foundation wall on the north side of the home. This is 209 East Washington Street, which is a local historic landmark, and this approval was for some tuck pointing. 225 Fairchild Street in the North Side Historic District. This is for replacement of the plywood soffit in this area with beadboard soffit, which would be more historically appropriate than the plywood that exists now.
Pretty hot.
For the minor reviews, this is 712 Grant Street in the Longfellow Historic District. This was for the stair and handrail repair for this stoop here. At 435 Oakland Avenue, also in Longfellow, this was a roof shingle replacement. At 503 Grant Street in Longfellow, this was an approval of a new garage construction. At 1039 East College Street in the East College Street Historic District, this was approval for roof shingle replacement and associated with that project repair and replacement of deteriorated trim. And then another roof replacement due to hail damage at 1125 Seymour Avenue, also in the Longfellow Historic District.
Okay. Consideration of minutes for March 12th, 2026, because we didn't get to, gotcha, okay. I was like, whoa.
I don't know
What do
if
I do right
anybody
now?
had any changes.
No. So,
So then just make a motion and vote.
Wagner moves to approve the minutes for March 12, 2026.
Beck seconds.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, doke. Moving on to the consideration of minutes for April 9th, 2026. I have nothing.
Thoman moves to approve the minutes for the April 9th, 2026 meeting.
Villanueva seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okey doke. Moving on to commission information.
I don't have any
Sweet.
specifically.
Okay.
I guess just to mention, Jessica is doing a presentation on Monday.
For the Iowa Association of Realtors.
So just talking about our historic districts, our conservation districts, what's it mean if you're selling a property in one of these districts? So this kind of education is really important.
That is great, yeah.
Oh, they're building out in Coralville.
Next to Vesta on the Iowa River Landing.
Oh.
Yeah.
We can all go.
It's a lunch and learn, I'm
Free
thinking.
lunch.
Not for me, but.
Less than quorum can go, right? That's the idea.
Oh, and the Preserve Iowa Summit is June 2nd and 3rd. I'll be going. It's just in Ankeny at the FAA building. It's kind of a down version of normal. I don't know why, with everything going on, they did not have a community that like applied to be the host. And so I think the SHPO's just putting it on and stuff. But anyway, you can register and go if you want. They're not having the same kind of roundtable discussion, you know, and stuff that they normally did.
Gotcha. Okay. I am unilaterally adjourning the meeting instead of having us vote.
Thank you.